Hey there, greetings everybody, and welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here today to continue the trek along our mini-series, as we call it. This is my favorite bands with family issues. So if you've been following up to this point, you know I'm just talking about, I've taken 5 of my I think there are top 20 bands that I like, and the ones who've had issues with members having issues with each other, right? Having problems with each other. So that's why I call them family issues. And basically I'm just going to talk about a little bit about their history, not only their history, but their history with me in particular. Also, I will probably talk a little bit about their current status, not only the band's status, but their status with each other, what the issue was, and whether I think this, if they were to solve these issues, whether it would be worthwhile to the fans, or myself in particular, to have them come back and play together for some sort. Now, if you've watched the first two, you know, my first 2 bands I did were Styx and Judas Priest. Basically, their issues are more or less with one member, and you know, I've given my opinion as to whether I think the 2 bands should be back together or whether that person should rejoin the groups. And you can go and watch those videos if you want to see what I came up with. But today we're going to do a band that has multiple issues. With just about everybody in the band has issues. This is one of the more well-known family squabbles that have been going on now since the release of this album back in 1979. Yes, that's when it started. Well, I don't actually believe that it started then. I think it was probably a problem right from the get-go on this album. However, it didn't really manifest itself too much until Peter Criss was asked to leave the band. According to the Kiss people, he was asked to leave the band. According to him, he left of his own volition. Point is that he isn't in the band anymore. So, and then, you know, they had some success. This was their breakout kind of album. This is actually a live album, or so they say. A really great album. And then they had their big studio breakout with the next album, which was Destroyer. Now, they did try to make a kind of a comeback after a sorry state in the early 80s. They came back with this album, which I think is a great album, even though there's a lot of questions as to who actually played on this album. I'm thinking that there was a few here that weren't playing too much, right? Or at all. So, my last Kiss album that I owned was Lick It Up, which I think is a great album as well. And then after that, I kind of drifted away from them, and I've not purchased or bought anything of theirs since. So you're going now, that's coming up to over 40 years since I've really had much to do with the band. So at one time, I was an absolute maniac over them. I had all kinds of posters in my room. I had the albums that were out. That's all I wanted to listen to. I listened to it night and day. I had the leather jacket with the Kiss logo studs on the back. It was popular in that time period. I did all of those things. However, I became somewhat disenchanted when this one came out. Not that I didn't like this album. I think this is actually a pretty solid album. But it really wasn't what I was expecting from Kiss. This to me was like they took that solo album kind of feel and put it here as a group effort. And I never really, it just began to, that was the beginning of the downhill trend for me. But by then I had already started moving out into other bands, one of them being Styx, of course. So, and so I haven't really had much to do with the band over the past 40 years, or anything they've done that's recent. And to be honest, I don't really think they do music albums anymore. They're pretty much just a cover band now. So this this band occurred. I'll give you a little brief history on them for those of you who do not know anything about them, or more likely don't want to know anything about them. They had their first album in late 1973. I think it was late in the year. Funny how I don't remember these things because they haven't mattered as much to me. And the reason, if you'd asked me this question when I was a kid, I could have told you any detail you wanted to know. But no, it was actually late 1973. The album is actually dated for 74, but I think, if I'm correct, it was either in January of 74 or late in 1973, this album. The band formed in 1973. That's the main point that I'm trying to make. This band consisted of lead guitarist Ace Frehley, who eventually did vocals as well, Gene Simmons, bass player and lead vocalist, Paul Stanley, frontman, lead vocalist and rhythm guitarist, and Peter Criss, vocals and drums. So that was the band. That band skyrocketed to unprecedented heights, but only for a brief period. They were like the blue star in the astronomy world. They burned brightly for a bit and then kind of faded a bit. To their credit, and I will make this statement now, to their credit, they continue to struggle and fight and try to change their music style, and several different types of albums in the early 80s, from Dynasty to Unmasked, which were similar. Then they tried to do a progressive rock album, which I have to admit, it's not really that bad of an album, but it just seems completely out of place with a band like Kiss. Then they came back and did that heavy Creatures of the Night, which I think was a good comeback album for them. It didn't get much attention, and then they did Lick It Up, which got more attention because they'd taken off their makeup. But for me, Kiss' biggest selling point was their makeup. However, from that point on, they got stronger and stronger and became a much bigger band again without the makeup. And to me, there's clearly two eras. There's some people that don't even know them as Kiss with the makeup prior to that. They thought it was a different band almost, I think. But anyways, that's their brief history of the band as where they stand. So the bones of contention were between Stanley Simmons and the other two, Ace Frehley and Peter Criss. So Peter Criss, much more outspoken and vocal in the initial era, decided to, he says he decided to walk from the band and do his own thing, and they said they kicked him out because of some of the stuff that he was doing while they were live on concert. Hard to know which one to believe because they've been caught, all of them, lying at different parts of time too, so difficult to say what the real issue was. But to me, the biggest issue is they didn't like each other. Paul Stanley's been on record of saying Peter Criss is stupid, doesn't know anything. I don't think Gene really likes too many people, or at least he didn't at that point in time. Maybe he's changed his ways, I'm not really sure. And even Stanley and Simmons have gotten into kind of a I'm not really a friend of his, we're just bandmates type of attitude. At least that's from Stanley's point of view. So, they don't even love each other, and they're in the same band for 50 years. Ace Frehley, of course, much more vocally open than he used to be, and, constantly having arguments with Gene or Paul over something or another. And this goes on between all four of them constantly. This is nothing new. I'm not saying anything that people don't know. However, at this point in their careers, which is winding down for Stanley and Simmons, they have already said that they will eventually retire. They're too old. They don't want to do it anymore. And I'm guessing it's getting to that point where there's been a lot of talk about bringing Ace and Peter back on board for a kind of final, either a final show or maybe a final couple of shows, or maybe a little small tour. I'm not sure what they're planning. I know they're doing their world tour right now, and most people say, well, Stanley and Simmons don't want anything to do with them. And Ace has gone on record as saying that if they were to pay him enough money, he would certainly be open to it. And I didn't know this at the time, but apparently he owns the rights to his makeup, his spaceman costume and persona. I did not know that. I thought that they had bought that Gene had patented the rights and they had no say on it. But he apparently has rights to those things, and he rents that rights to them to continue with it. That's news to me. I did not know that at all. But he has gone on record saying if they pay the right money, he would come back on board. And I'm almost certain that even though Peter Criss is very vocally outspoken against them, I'm almost certain that if the right money came along, he would jump on board for that too. And even though Paul and Gene both say that they don't want nothing to do with him, that's not true. The right money will bring them all back together. And if Gene and Paul think they can make a huge amount of money by having those two on board for a short period of time, it's going to happen. I think it'll happen. I'm almost sure it's going to happen. I will actually be surprised if it doesn't happen. So, having said all that, and I want to make something else clear to it. By no means, if they do this kind of reunion tour for 2 or 3 shows or for a week or for a month or however long they decide to do it for, as long as they're making money, they're going to do it. That by no means negates the fact that KISS will still exist. Even if Gene and Paul retire, which has been suggested, because I don't know exactly how old Paul Stanley is, but I'm pretty sure Gene's in his early 70s now, like 72 or 73. And Peter Criss has got to be 77, somewhere around there. So even if they do this tour and it's done, they do it, final episode goes, final show goes, everybody's happy, that's not the end of KISS. They will find, because there's a few bands out there that have lots of cover bands that follow them, and KISS is definitely one of those bands. There are hundreds of cover bands that play and do the KISS thing everywhere. And I know for a fact that there are lots of guys who probably do Gene and Paul better than themselves. And they could find somebody amongst them and put them into the KISS family and the KISS logo and have the band continue with 4 guys who were not in the band originally and just going out there and touring and playing all of the hits from the 70s and that. And they would continue. And they would do it because there's money in it. And there's no doubt about in my mind that KISS is never going to be finished. Ever. Not going to happen. So having said all that, now it comes down to, am I somebody who would like to see this? Well, at one point, when it was in the 90s and early part of the century, I wanted that to happen, and actually did happen. And I was happy to see it. I was. But at that point in time, although I hadn't been listening to them for some time, I still liked their music. And I still like their music now, but I don't really have an interest in the band too much anymore. So if they were to not get back together or get back together, I'm somewhat indifferent to it. It doesn't really matter to me if they play together or not. I'm not going to see them. I don't go to see much rock concerts. In fact, I haven't been to one for a long time, mostly because of my hearing, but I wouldn't go see them. I have no interest in seeing them. So I'm a bit indifferent to what they do or don't do, but I'm not indifferent to their fans. So I know that this is one of those bands that people either love or hate, and then there's people like me who loved them at one time but somewhat indifferent to them now. And but I'm not indifferent to their fans. Their fans are hugely KISS fans, let's put it that way. KISS and Rush, and there's a few other bands that are like this, that their fans are absolutely devoted to them and will only listen to their music. I'm not one of those people, but I can see for the fans wanting this to happen, wanting Peter and Paul and Ace and Gene to get along and have that feeling they had in the 70s. And they will do it for the right price. But as soon as it's over, they'll back the mudslinging and stuff like that. I can see that happening right away. So, and they're one of the few bands out there who all 4 of the original members are still alive, still active. So, Yeah, I can see that happening, and I think it probably will happen. So there you go. My favorite bands with family issues, and Kiss is still in my top 20 favorite bands, mostly because of the stuff from the 70s. So there you have it. I don't know what more to say about that other than it's just a topic for today. So I hope that you enjoyed this topic, so please like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. What are your comments? How do you feel about Ace or Peter or both of them rejoining Kiss? Do you think this is a good thing, a bad thing, or something you'd like to see or not like to see, or you don't care one way or the other? Or maybe you just hate the band and wish they'd just go away. Whatever you want to put down there, I'll listen to it. So have yourself a good day, take care, and goodbye.